Oh, hello YouTube. I've watched Peter Watkins' 1964 TV film Culloden. Let's watch a clip and talk about it.
This is the advanced battalion of an English government army of 9,000 men. Their objective, Culloden Moor, 4.5 miles southeast of the Highland town of Inverness. Their purpose, the destruction of the Highland Jacobite army of rebellion, a tired, ill-administered force of less than 5,000 men who wait just beyond the top of this ridge. Prince Charles Edward Stuart, Jacobite Commander-in-Chief, former military experience, 10 days attendance at a siege at the age of 13.
You must understand, without putting too fine a point on it, that the army here is in a total shambles.
I've got half my company missing. I just can't find them. They've gone off somewhere to sleep.
Your Royal Highness, why exactly are Mr. Sheridan, Sir John Macdonald, and Mr. O'Sullivan handling the administration of your army?
Because I chose them. Because I consider those gentlemen to be utterly trustworthy and competent.
The first thing my men will find when they do awake is the enemy on them, cutting their throats.
Okay, so Culloden, and I'm calling this a film review, and you might be a dick and say, well, it's not a film review because it was a BBC kind of one-off special and it's only 68 minutes or something like that. Well, fuck you. The Academy, Motion Picture Academy, considers anything over 40 minutes can be considered a feature. And yeah, okay, this was made for television in the 60s. However, the BFI have put it out on a Blu-ray, so I'm going to consider it to be a film for this review. Culloden or Culloden, I don't know. Well, I'm probably going to say it both ways in this review. True story about the Battle at Culloden. And this is where I've got to be really careful because my history's crap, and I'm sure I'm probably going to say things that will offend some people in terms of getting things right. Culloden is about a battle between the Jacobite rebellion army who against the English army, and the Jacobites want a Catholic king on the throne in England. And this is a story about the battle at Culloden, I think, which really stopped the Jacobite rebellion, and is probably just been English. I know this is just one of those reasons why people don't like the English, because essentially we've at some point invaded or killed or persecuted a nation pretty close by, or not even close by. Internationally, we've probably fucked up some nations along the way. Now, I think technically this would be considered a docudrama. So it's all reenactment. It's all reenacted in reconstructions, like this kind of style that's not hiding its roots in trying to convey facts, I should say like statistical facts, and trying to be sort of forensic in terms of representing sort of giving kind of a forensic kind of feeling about what happened at the Battle of Culloden. It's told with a style of, it's all actors. There are no sort of, it doesn't cut to sort of like modern day, or what at the time was modern day historians talking about it and giving their opinion. It's all kind of reconstructed. But it's done in this style where there's a narrator, and a narrator is telling you beat by beat what is happening through the battle, and also telling you kind of about events that you're seeing, the impact that will have later on in history. So there is a narrator, and that narrator is very kind of clinical BBC from the 60s, RP fashion of relaying the events. And this is kind of where the style is really fresh and innovative. You have historical characters within it talking directly to the camera, giving their opinion about what's happening. And I think the key thing to talk about this is like, okay, we're talking about a piece of BBC television from the 1960s. You have to reframe and watch it from that perspective, just as you would do if you're watching anything that's kind of more than a couple of decades old. But the style of this, I think, even for now, is pretty innovative. And the reason I chose to watch Culloden is cinematographer Roger Deakin has mentioned this quite a lot. Has been this and War Games. Peter Watkins, other kind of very kind of seminal piece of BBC television. He's mentioned that as a reference film. That's kind of what prompted me to watch this. And the style of this is really innovative even for now, let alone what I can imagine watching it in the 60s would have been like, where you're doing this thing of you're telling a piece of history from 1746, but you are having your characters in it break the fourth wall and acknowledge the camera and talk directly to the audience. So that's pretty revolutionary on the own. I can't think of a modern example that currently does that. I mean, you see it a lot in sitcoms. Almost kind of most sitcoms at the moment, like the US Office or Parks and Recreation, they adopt that sort of method where the characters are breaking the fourth wall and the camera is almost a witness within the events. You get that in contemporary sitcoms a lot now, but I don't think even now I've seen that in a historical kind of context. And the camera is really an event. So a motion picture camera, which would not have been invented for more than over 100 years after the events of Culloden, the characters within this historical event are interacting with, not just directly talking to it, but there is actually even a scene where someone puts their hands up and covers the lens and walks away. So that's kind of really innovative even for now, let alone in 64 when this was done. The other thing is it's kind of really forensic. I think we all now, it does a clever thing where the battle sequences are shot documentary style, handheld. Yet we've seen that a lot. We see that a lot now. Probably in 64, that was probably new. But it has that thing that Saving Private Ryan does in terms of that kind of shaky cam action feel, where it's not the camera whipping around back and forth. There are some points where it does that. The shaky camera comes from, you feel like it is a camera operator that is in the field capturing it, but explosions are going off around them, and as hard as they're trying to keep that shot still, it is rumbling and giving you a feel. So you really feel like you are kind of witnessing an event with kind of the witnessing a moment with the way that the style of the film has been done. And then it breaking the fourth wall again adds a whole other layer and a texture and a humanity to the events surrounding it that makes ultimately it quite harrowing in terms of, I think sometimes when we talk about historical battles, we think, well, that was fucking ages ago, and you sort of lose the connection to it. But then with this being told in a very kind of immediate style, it mirrors contemporary kind of news footage. But even for now, it kind of feels fairly contemporary for kind of news footage. It makes it all the more harrowing, and you get a perspective of what it would have been like to be there and the impact on other people, and people kind of the impact on people around the Battle of Culloden. You know, when I was watching this, I was thinking, Christ, imagine you just turned on BBC One, you know, in 1964 and watched this. Would have blown your mind and been even more sort of harrowing, really. And it is harrowing. It's not gory, but in its very clinical fashion about telling you of what happened and timings of the day. It creates a picture to make you think, fuck, it would have been horrific to been there. And also just around the unfairness of war in terms of people were drafted on both sides, both the Jacobite side and also sort of the English army. People were drafted in to be there who didn't want to be there, and it was all about hierarchy in terms of, on some sides, about what land you had. Basically meant if you owned land, you were, you know, you kind of had to fight for honour, and if you were on that, or you rented land off of someone, you had to be there because it almost was like part of your tax and your payment for living on that land. And so harrowing, really. It does this really great thing. So this obviously is TV made in the 60s. You don't have Braveheart style battle sequences with tons of extras and people kind of clashing and running around. but it creates this great sense of scope where you'll have a talking head of a character talking into the camera. And a big part of the first kind of 15-20 minutes of the film is all really people, in character talking directly to the camera. But the frame around them is just filled with a lot of bodies of people to kind of, and other incidental characters to kind of create this feeling of scope. And then peppered in that, you'll occasionally get some great sort of, landscape shots of the highlands, just to pepper out and give you that sense of scale. And then when you get into the battle sequences, as the battlefield would have been, it was covered in smoke, and they do lots of stuff of shooting into smoke and having figures backlit to really kind of create this sense of atmosphere for being there, which again, I think would have been massively, ahead of its time when this was shown on TV in the 60s. So yeah, it was great. And I think kind of the other thing kind of generally about this, when I started watching it, it feels very and it could be because it's got a very RP English narrator on this. It feels somewhat one-sided to begin with, setting up the Jacobite army basically have been fairly inept. And to begin with, I thought, this is kind of a very kind of biased retelling of it. But then as it goes on, and this is somewhat spoilers, it is harrowing really kind of what the English army did do. So it is somewhat, if you're watching this and you kind of feel like, to begin with, I mean, if you watch any kind of piece of fiction or reconstruction about real life events, we're all grown-ups, so we know that it probably didn't play out exactly like that, and there is all grey areas and there are no black and white. But if you're watching this and you feel like, to begin with, it's very kind of one-sided, it does very much even that out. And it's incredibly effective in terms of its performances of, like, again, TV in 64, I don't really recognise anyone in it. And that kind of lends to the immediacy of watching it now, of kind of feeling like, these are real people there in the moment, and it's, adds to the horror of the conflict of it. So yeah, Peter Watkins, Culloden. Would I recommend it? I would recommend it if you're interested in the history. So that's it, Culloden. Watch it. It's out on the Blu-ray. There's quite a nice Blu-ray with that and War Games, which I've not seen, and I'm tentatively, it sounds even more harrowing. I don't know whether I'm necessarily going to watch. But there's a nice Blu-ray out by the BFI. All right, goodbye.